Okay, hey everyone, this is Stan Scott. This is the very first episode of the Foggy Bottom Line podcast. I'm here with Scott Konopasek, who is a candidate for the House of Delegates in the 59th District. Scott's also an Army buddy. He was a military officer. I'll let him introduce himself in a second. I spent 20 years as a combat soldier in the Army, driving around on tanks. And since then, I've done some defense contracting work, and my academic experience is in political science and international relations. This podcast, as the tagline says, will be about politics, economics, and now and then some other silly things. But today, I think we're going to talk to Scott about uh, cheating and fraud in politics. Scott is a former election official, and Scott, I'll let you take it away and tell the audience a little bit about yourself, real quick.
Thanks, Stan. Thanks for the invitation to be on your first podcast. It's a real honor. Uh, like Stan said, I'm a former Army intelligence officer, and I was a public servant, local public servant, election official for uh, nearly 30 years in four different states. So I am now currently a candidate for the state house here in Virginia. Uh, Kind of an accidental candidate in a way. I just saw some things going on that I found it hard to stomach as a former election official and someone who's been committed to integrity and honesty in elections for a very long time.
Well, thanks, Scott. We'll talk about the candidacy and the election here a little bit here in a minute. But I want to kick this off by talking about Trump's exhortation of the Texas legislature and Governor Abbott down there to basically redistrict their House seats in the middle of the cycle of the census cycle in an effort to create more Republican seats. To me, this indicates some worry on the Republican side that they stand a good chance of losing control of the House of Representatives. So they're trying to game the system a little bit. And while not technically against the rules, this is in some ways cheating, if only cheating on the norms. So since your background is in elections and election integrity and election security, I thought you might like to talk a little bit about what you think about this mid decade redistricting.
Yeah, well, thanks, Stan. So, in every competitive endeavor, opponents are always trying to get an advantage over their opponent. That's just the nature of competition, whether it's sports, combat, politics, whatever. But sometimes seeking that advantage crosses a line that no longer respects the understood rules of the game. And I think this is a classic example of that in Texas. Oh, like you said, Stan, there's nothing that prohibits a mid-decade reapportionment, uh, but or redistricting. Actually, they're technically different terms. Um, but when the rules are changed in the middle of the game, uh, one might be crossing the line into not just trying to gain advantage, but to actually cheating or gaming the system. And we see that all the time in elections, mostly on the part of parties and candidates. But I think this redistricting in Texas, while not illegal, is certainly norm busting. And what's really amazing is the stated purpose right up front of why they're doing it. There's no pretext. It's to get advantage going into the 2026 election. So I guess cheating to a certain degree is in the eye of the beholder. But I would posit that people don't cheat if they're not afraid of losing, and people only cheat when they're afraid of losing. Uh, so how do you respond to cheating? Well, the rules say you just kind of turn the other cheek. Normally, that's the norm. You just try to outsmart them and work harder and outcompete them in other ways. But sometimes I'm afraid that the cheating might get to a point where uh, or you have to resort to other means. And it looks like Governor Newsom in California and some others are sort of engaging in an arms race here with redistricting, which uh, may be good, may be bad. It's hard to know.
Well, as the right wingers will point out, and they've talked about this and on different social media platforms since this came up, they pointed out that Democratic states have gerrymandered their own states, blue states, so that they create the conditions, and this is especially true in the Northeast and in states with only two or three representatives. They've created conditions where even in the blue state, the GOP candidates will get 44% of the vote, overall, but won't actually be able to win a seat because of the way the lines are drawn,
Right.
and it's already this way. So it's not correct to say that nobody does this or that blue states don't do this or Democrats don't do this, but the difference here is doing it in the middle of the census cycle and trying to do it just a year before basically an election, 15, 16 months before an election. Like you said, losers feel the need to cheat. If you're way behind and your only chance is to cheat or game the system in some way, then you get an incentive to do that. Now Newsom is responding sort of in kind, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that, because have you seen Newsom's? Because I don't want to be too serious here. I want to keep this a little bit
He's
lighthearted,
all
right?
caps.
Have you
Ex
seen him
post.
trolling
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
trolling Trump with his all caps, Trump imitation sort of
Right.
tweets? And Newsom is basically saying, look, we can play this game too, and he's fighting back in a way Democrats have not, right?
Right. Yeah, but let's just back up for a second, because the Republicans, as they often do, throw out false equivalencies all the time, uh,
Fair
and
enough.
they
Yep.
say that what they're doing in Texas now is the same as what Democrats did in 2021, and they do every census. That is absolutely not true. That is factually not the case, at least in the case of California and New York. Both California and New York have constitutional amendments that require an impartial commission to draw the boundaries, to do the redistricting. They take that power out of the hands of those directly elected and affected by where the lines fall, and give it to an independent body. Now, maybe the outcomes aren't very different than if partisans were making the decisions about redistricting. But at least in terms of process, there's a possibility, there's a separation, there's a firewall between those with a direct interest and in those drawing the line. Now, that being said, Newsom's gambit to retaliate is much more complicated than Texas's effort, because uh, Newsom needs to get the voters to say, ignore the Constitution this time, and then he can draw the lines. But he just can't, and the legislature just can't draw the lines like that Texas is doing right now. The reason that New York is probably not going to be able to respond at all this time around is because their rules, their constitutional rules and laws about redistricting, wind their hands even further than California. So I think the model for how this should be done is an independent party who draws the lines. But that's a state by state decision, and as long as some states choose to uh, load up and partisanize the drawing of the lines, um, we're going to have this uneven battlefield, so to speak. But I would also point out that Republicans, for a couple of decades now, uh, most overtly and most egregiously gerrymander lines. Uh, and they do it in Wisconsin, they do it in Florida, they do it in Texas, they do it in Minnesota and Michigan, all kinds of places. Republicans are very aggressively in the state legislatures drawing these lines to the advantage of their own political party, both at the state level and at the or federal level offices. So will Newsom be successful? I think there's a really good chance that the voters of California who see themselves and have seen themselves for a long time sort of in opposition to Trump or being Trump's punching bag, are probably going to say, well, yeah, Gavin, one time around, we'll let you do it one time. Will it make a difference? Who knows? But the arms race is on.
Right. And it sounds like one thing you're kind of pointing out, or at least implying, is that the states that go down this nonpartisan, independent sort of commission pathway to redistricting and apportionment, because that's what's the result of it is, tend to be the blue states. It's California and it's New York. We know that happened in Virginia. We came up with a similar system here. There's some flaws to that system that you and I have talked about before, that have led to some sort of pathways for cheating and fraud here in Virginia at a much more local level. So, would you care to explain to the audience that the Virginia version of that commission and why it would be very difficult for Virginia to respond in kind to Texas's plan?
Sure. Yeah, Virginia made a sort of a lukewarm, uh, half-hearted effort at independent redistricting in the last census cycle. But in many ways, the system that they set up was designed to fail. Uh, and and it really didn't answer the mail, I think, of what a healthy system for doing this should be. Specifically, the legislation that created this independent commission uh, uh, comprised the commission of partisans from both parties, and not just partisans, Republicans and Democrats, but they totally left out independents or voters who are unaffiliated. So they collapsed the world down into this duopoly of red and blue and said, no, you guys draw the lines and fight it out, which is all fine in theory, but when you build a commission where there's an equal number of Republican votes and equal number of Democratic votes in a highly partisan context, it's going to fail. Uh, it, it's going to come to a stalemate real fast, and that's bingo. That's exactly what happened here in Virginia. Now, there was a safety hatch, so to speak, a plan B, is if the commission was stalemated, that the redistricting responsibilities would go to the Supreme Court, and they would draw the boundaries. And that's actually what happened. So the Supreme Court came up with new boundaries for congressional districts, state senate, and state house for the state of Virginia. And the consequences of that, it yielded a work product that is very different than previous work products or new maps from redistricting. When the legislature was making those decisions, they were very meticulous and conscientious of protecting incumbents and not doing anything to move an incumbent out of the district that they're currently represented. The Supreme Court had no such limitations imposed on themselves, so they drew the lines where they thought they made the most sense and balanced the population, resulting in elected incumbents, both Republican and Democrat, being drawn outside of the boundaries of the districts that they were currently representing. So for the first time, Virginia had to figure out, kind of two questions. One is, until new people are elected in the new district, who represents what district? And I'm not sure exactly how that was resolved. But the other issue was, what about these people drawn outside their district? How do we handle them? Or what do they do? It's their choice what they do. And really the choices are retire, run against the other incumbent that's in the district, or legitimately pack up and move your whole household into the district. But politicians don't always see any of those as being very viable options. So they go for option number 4, which is game the system or cheat. Pretend like you live in the district and hope nobody calls you out on it. And see if the voters really care. So we have a couple of situations coming out of redistricting in 2021, 2022 here in Virginia, where the candidates are faking like they live. Not just candidates, but incumbents are faking like they live in the district that they represent. Uh, so I wish I could say it was only one party, but it, it's both parties were victimized by the lines, and candidates and incumbents in both parties, yeah, made some decisions. Some of them that may be uh, a little suspect in terms of how they posture themselves uh, with relationship to living in their district.
Right. And your opponent, Buddy Fowler, is one of those folks who is pretending. Now, to be fair, there's some Democrats that appear at least to be doing the same thing. They don't seem to be quite so blatant about it, and it appears that the best example, Senator Hashmi, who legitimately moved, at least temporarily, into a new place in order to stay in the district. I think she understood that since she's running for lieutenant governor, that would become a moot point at some point if she wins. But the big example here, I think, is Buddy Fowler. Now, other Republicans have done one of those options, basically run against the incumbent, right? The other incumbent, because what happens here is the new lines draw someone out of the district they represent when the lines are drawn, and so now you have two incumbent Republicans or two incumbent Democrats who live in the same district. And in Virginia, you must live in the district in order to represent that district, that seat. And for the House of Representatives, for Congress, that's not true. The Constitution says I could run for the U.S. Congress in the 10th district in Virginia, even though I don't live in that district. But in the House of Delegates and in the state Senate in Virginia, you must live in the same district. So Buddy Fowler basically, you probably know the story better than I do, since you've done a lot of research on this, and I understand you talked to some officials who could take action on this, and they've chosen not to. And we'll talk about that in a minute if you want to. But it seems to me that it looks a lot to me like Buddy Fowler is just plain cheating and potentially even committing fraud. Is that about right?
That's my take on the situation, and in fact, to be honest, uh, Buddy Fowler's pretending to live in the district was probably the major motivator for me to actually jump into this race at the very last minute. Um, I'm retired. I've worked 30 years as an election official at the county level. I've been consulting with the Carter Center for the last couple of years on election integrity issues. And for many years as an election official, I was accused by Republicans of either committing or abetting fraud in the elections that I oversaw. All false accusations. So when I found out that I was represented by someone who was cheating, who didn't live in the district, who actually was doing what people had accused me of doing over the years,
Every
I just
accusation is a confession, right?
right. I just about lost it, and I said, okay, I got to do something about this. So I jumped in the race because otherwise he was going to be, uh, you know, unopposed and move right back into office without being challenged, without having to respond to voters about these allegations. So that's what got me into the race, and that's really what keeps the fire in my belly going. Uh, is when I see fraud and cheating, particularly in elections, I take it rather personally, like many of my colleagues in the elections profession do. But also, it feels like a call to action to do something about it. Now, I went and visited with the electoral board. I visited with the general registrar. I visited with the Commonwealth attorney, several Commonwealth attorneys. about the situation, and the power establishment in Hanover County is not inclined to do anything about it, hiding behind the fact that Virginia's laws about how to deal with enforcing election fraud investigations, or investigating it, or responding to it, are really thin and kind of weak. That leaves a lot to the discretion of local officials on how to handle it, which is really great in many ways because the fact patterns are different in every case. But when it requires some desire to do something, or to exercise some discretion when you don't necessarily need to, um, that lets situations like this persist, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
And just to make sure that some folks in the audience are clear, for those of you who don't live in Virginia, the 59th district that Scott's running to represent is made up of Hanover, parts of Hanover County, the western part of Hanover County, Louisa County, and part of Henrico County. Louisa and Hanover are both very red, and in Virginia, the Commonwealth's attorney, who, if there was actual fraud identified, would be responsible for prosecuting that. That's an elected position. And because these are really red areas, very Republican areas, it's unlikely that a Commonwealth's attorney would challenge an incumbent Republican House of Delegates, delegate, right? Now, when I use the word fraud, I want to make sure we're clear that this is alleged fraud. This may be happening. I'm not necessarily accusing Buddy Fowler of actually committing a crime. But if he's registered to vote in a place where he does not live, that is technically in Virginia against the law, and it's election fraud. And so it's very interesting to me, and I'm sure to you too, Scott, that the folks like the Republicans who have been accusing you of sort of playing fast and loose with the law in the past now appear at least to be doing the same thing. So, do you want to tell us a little more about your district, or do you want to? I mean, I don't want to beat this horse to death if it's already laying on the ground and suffocating, right?
Yeah.
But
Well, I think there's some things that would be helpful to just clarify. First of all, it's not a criminal offense for a buddy not to live in the district.
right,
Okay, that's not a crime. That's not. Uh, the Constitution says if you move out of the district, if you're not in the district, you have to step down. Okay, and the law says that in order to run for a district, you have to live in the district. So the fact that uh, he allegedly doesn't live in the district in and of itself is not an allegation of a crime. But like most cover-ups, the cover-up is worse offense than the actual thing that you're trying to cover up. And in order to put on this facade of living in the district, uh, anyone who does this, and Buddy has done this, has to register to vote at an address in the district. Uh, and as you said, Stan, the law requires that you live at the address that you are registered at. So if you intentionally register at an address at which you don't live or not entitled to vote, that is voter registration fraud under the statute, both federal statute and state statute. Now, after you've registered fraudulently, if you actually vote using that registration, that's a second offense. That is now voting fraud. So if you're voting at an address at which you were not eligible to vote, and you're voting for offices for which you're not eligible to cast votes, that is voter fraud. So really, the egregious thing in this whole situation isn't that Buddy lives outside the district. It's that in order to put on a facade that he does, he committed at least two crimes, and maybe a third crime, making a false official statement when he changed his driver's license to an address that he doesn't live at. So, what do you do about this situation? The law is pretty vague, and we already know that people who are in a position to do something are not inclined to do it. But I think this is important for voters to understand that someone who wants to represent them, who's seeking re-election to continue representing, has the ethics of someone who would, number one, game the system to pretend like they're eligible, and then to, in pursuit of uh, that game, actually commit things that are crimes under state and federal law. And uh, I think voters should understand that and take the kind of character that it takes to conduct yourself that way into consideration as they make choices about who they want to represent.
Right. And I can tell you, I lived in Hanover County for more than a decade. I'm in Henrico County now, and I can tell you that the people in Hanover County and Louisa County and Henrico County, they're good people. They're upstanding people. They're very red areas, and I think a lot of these folks misunderstand the state we're in right now and what's going on. We could talk for hours about fraud if we start bringing Trump into the discussion. And I saw an interesting thing, and I'll probably do a short video on this here sometime in the next week or so. But an interesting little, basically a summary of all of Trump's crimes and lawsuits, settlements, and business failures, impeachment, all those kinds of things. And it's quite the laundry list. And we don't think about it until you put it all on one sheet of paper, right? But the Fowler thing, I think, as you say, to me, that's a character flaw. That's a character issue. He's not a stand-up guy like the people that he wants to represent. And all of us, red and blue, all of us want to do the right thing as we understand it as a general matter. We have very big differences about what right looks like. And trust me, folks out there, when you spend any time at all in the military, you have to learn what right looks like. And that's morally, ethically, honor. Do the right thing is a key part of military leadership. And as a former NCO, and I know, Scott, you as a former officer, you understand that. And we would not have tolerated this from one of our subordinates in the Army, right? So what do you think? I mean, it seems to me we need some clarification on this. Is there anything, if you were elected, that you would try to get done to resolve this kind of issue? What do you think we should do to fix it so it doesn't happen in the future?
Right. Virginia's election laws are not as robust as what we would really like them to be, or as what we hope they would be, with all the challenges that are going on to voting rights in general and dealing with election integrity and allegations of election fraud. So, as the subject matter expert on elections, if I were in the legislature, I would hope to spearhead an effort to review Virginia's election statutes and make them a little bit more robust and flexible, and specifically to focus at the beginning on making sure that we have the tools, that prosecutors have the tools, investigators have the tools, election officials have the tools to enforce the rules that are already on the book. Not necessarily proposing any new laws or restrictions, but making sure that we have processes, procedures, and authorities laid out in statute so people know what the hell they're supposed to do and can't hide behind the silence of the law. And beyond that, like I said, there are many things that can be done to make Virginia's laws more robust. One of the other priority actions in elections, if I were in the legislature, is to make sure that the constitutional amendment to have automatic restoration of civil rights after someone convicted of a felony has served their sentence. I think the voters need to decide that, and I think that the arbitrary way that we have of the governor using his discretion without revealing what criteria he's applying to restore rights is it can't stand anymore in the 21st century. So yeah, I will be an agent for election reform, not upheaval, but uh, but reform and strengthening and bolstering our election laws and processes.
At a minimum, make things less vague. So
Absolutely.
the rules are clear and understandable by regular folks who can then, look at things and say, wait, that's not what you should be doing, or you should be doing this other thing. And guys, I want to make clear here that this is coming off a lot like an interview, and I don't really mean for it to be that way. Although I think it's turned out that way because Scott really is the subject matter expert on elections. And since we're talking about political cheating and fraud and sort of gaming the system, I just had some questions I wanted to ask Scott, but I want to let everyone know that going down the road, Scott will be more of a co-host than an interviewee and
You're
a
loading me
guest,
up with
right?
responsibilities, huh?
Yeah, so we're going to do this together. We're going to keep moving this down the road, and we've got some ideas for some real guests to bring in, and from time to time this will just be Scott and I bantering and talking about an issue, something like that. So um, this is kind of a work in progress. The production values will get better, but we wanted to go ahead and get started because Scott and I both think that we're in a pretty crucial time in American history. One of the things that we'll talk about down the road will be American history and how we leave some of it out when we teach it to kids. The Trail of Tears, the slavery and what that did to us. Great book on this called "The Half Has Never Been Told" about the association between slavery and capitalism. Excellent book. But we this is a project of love by Scott and I that we really want to see if we can turn this into something that will be educational, valuable for people. We'll talk politics a lot. We'll get into some economics and, like I said, some other silly things. So, Scott,
So
you want
Tim,
to?
before you wrap, and since
I'm
it's
not ready. I'm not quite ready to wrap. I want to go a little
oh,
longer. I just wanted to try to do a transition into something maybe just a little bit more lighthearted, but also give you a chance to talk about the campaign because this is an important. It's very important that the Democrats keep control of the House of Delegates after this cycle, and if possible, win the governor's seat as well. So I do want to give you a chance to talk about the campaign, but go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
yeah, that's all right. But since it's kind of morphed into an interview-esque kind of exchange here, let me ask you a question.
Please
Uh,
do go for it.
tell us why you're doing this. Tell us what Foggy Bottom Line means, what the symbolism is, and why you feel a passion for having this type of public dialogue.
I came up with the Foggy Bottom Line name years ago, really almost 20 years ago, when I was studying at George Washington University, and that campus is in Foggy Bottom in D.C., which is where the basically the U.S. Diplomatic Corps has its home base. I added the Foggy Bottom Line because I think that the bottom line on most issues is pretty foggy. It's really very difficult to get to a black and white yes or no, this or that answer on almost anything. Now, there are some few, right, that are either true or they're not true. Um, but a lot of it's very foggy. And I think some discussion about issues that helps clarify some of that fogginess and what the real discussion ought to be about is helpful. I'm also, like I mentioned, I'm a 20-year combat soldier on tanks as an NCO in the Army. I swore that oath to protect the Constitution that we all swore. And I think that Constitution is in danger. I believe that, I honestly believe that the whole GOP project with Project 2025 and the Trump thing, the ICE that looks a lot like Hitler's brown shirts. I think this is a fascist program that's driven by oligarchs. It's driven by billionaires who really believe that they're the smartest people on the planet and they should control everything. And if you want to hear them tell you that, they will tell you that. Curtis Yarvin, who is a Peter Thiel protege, will tell you that. He'll say it out loud without mincing any words. He wants a monarchy here. And I think we have to do something to stop it. There's not much I can do personally. Right? I don't have a lot of money I can give to campaigns like Peter Thiel and the Koch brothers have, but we can speak up. And we can speak up, and we can try to bring to light this foggy sort of the fogginess of these issues and how our discussion of them sometimes takes us down the wrong pathway. But I'm very passionate about this. I have a voice that I want to raise. I know you do too, Scott. We've both run for office. You're running right now. I've run twice in the past because I think the system is broken. It's deteriorating rapidly before our eyes. And, you know, you and I have talked about Wilhoit's Law, which basically is the idea that the legal system binds some people without protecting them, but protects others without binding them. And the Buddy Fowler case is kind of a case in point here, because if a Democrat was doing the same thing, these Commonwealth's attorneys might take a different action on it. Right? Just like, Trump is sending the National Guard to D.C. because of crime, right? Although crime is demonstrably down in D.C. now. But he said he couldn't do that on January 6th, 2020, right? Or 2021. So, you either can or you can't. This one's not foggy. I posted a video the other day on Facebook about the Epstein thing. This is not foggy at all. It's about child sex trafficking. That's the issue. It's not a foggy thing. Now, Trump either had something to do with it or he didn't. And whatever's out there that would either exonerate Donald Trump or indict Donald Trump needs to be public. We need to know if the president of the United States is doing these things. And these are the kind of things that I want to talk about and highlight and bring up. And I'm very happy to have your help doing that.
Yeah. So I have this image in my head of you and me, two little Dutch boys with our fingers in the dike. Okay.
I like that. Yeah, well, and the
redheads.
There's cracks everywhere, and we're not the only ones. There's a lot of other little Dutch boys with trying to put their fingers in the dike. Seth Abramson's out there, Heather Cox Richardson's out there, and maybe someday we'll get to that level too. But it takes a lot of research. It takes a lot of work. I'm committed to doing that, and we're gonna try to keep those holes plugged and keep the water, the flood of fascism out of the U.S. and out of our Constitution.
Yeah. So the Foggy Bottom Line is your personal effort, your personal finger in the dike to stem the flow. My finger in the dike is right now being a candidate to represent. Fairly represent and honestly represent the voters in the 59th district. And I think in many ways, anyone listening to or watching this podcast should consider what's your call to act. If what we're talking about resonates with you, if you see an ongoing threat to democracy or the way that you think democracy should be functioning, what are you going to do? How are you going to stick your finger in the dike, and what does that finger look like? So consider this kind of a call to action to anyone out there who agrees with the sentiment and who shares the same concerns.
And one of the ways to do that, at least in the very short term, there's a lot of ways of doing this. The Indivisibles are holding protests, the No Kings thing, the hands off protests. There's a lot of protests organized, and even if you don't think actual protesting with funny signs is very helpful, I can tell you from personal experience that there is value to it. There's value in it. Helps create a community. It helps let people know that you're not the only one out there that cares about this and wants to do something. It creates conversations, okay, and it gets media coverage. And Scott, one of the things you and I have been talking about as we started your campaign is how the legacy media the CNNs and the MSNBCs and the Fox News and even the local stations, they're not getting the traction they used to. People are ignoring them, especially young people. Now, even Fox News, that still has the right wing, MAGA audience, they're losing viewership. And where are people now going for their news and for their information? Some older folks are going to Facebook. Younger folks are going to TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. And so these social media platforms is where people are getting their information now. Now, the downside to that is that's where the misinformation is also spreading. And that's part of this project as well, is to counter some of that misinformation. Okay. And try to push back against people who are telling you things that simply aren't true. They're just not. Now, like I said, the bottom line can be foggy. So what is truth and, what is just someone's opinion? There can be a spectrum. It can be gray, right? But these are discussions we need to have. And I think, doing the protests, writing letters to the editor, calling your congressman, calling your senator, calling your delegate or your state senator, go to town halls, go to meetings. When your local party committee, whether Democrat or Republican, is holding a meeting, go there and tell them what you think about the state of affairs. But
if you want to do something even more immediate and less abstract, you can follow this campaign and donate your time, your effort, your energy, and some of your money to help us get the message out.
And that's where I was kind of going with that, is that you can follow Scott's campaign. The website is Scott4va.com. That's Scott K. Scott K for the number Scott K4va, the number 4. That's the website. There's a lot of good campaign updates there. There's a campaign blog where Scott shares some of his thoughts on issues. There's a gallery which got some videos when Scott speaks or when we visit folks, and it's a good source of information about the campaign. You can also follow Scott. Scott, tell us about your social media handles so folks can try to get on that. And I'll put this in the show notes too, folks, so you can look at this later.
Okay, so our Facebook handle is elect Scott K. Konopasek HD59. I know it's really long, but if you just do a search on elect Scott K, it'll come up. Facebook has been kind of our mainstay, as a lot of most of the constituents in the area use Facebook as a means of communicating. On X, my handle is Election Yoda, so at Election Yoda.
I like that handle. That's a good one.
Yeah, I've had that one for a long time. People always get a kick out of it. We're on Blue Sky, also on Instagram. If you just search Elect Scott K, you'll come across most of them. So one of the things we want to do that is not typical of this level of a campaign is to really focus on a digital ground game. Engaging people where they're at in their homes, on their devices, and to juice the algorithm by getting people who support us and support the principles and ideals to follow, like, share, and actually create their own content tagging the campaign, so we can get the word out to this largely rural community that's unserved or underserved by other media sources.
Right, and you can find me on pretty much all the social media at Foggy Bottom Line. So Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube, it's just Foggy Bottom Line. And there's a written blog, foggybottomline.com, you can check out. And just find good sources of information somewhere. There's a lot of good ones out there. And in future podcasts, Scott and I will share some of the ones that we look at. In preparation for creating this show, I've been sort of studying other podcasts. I've studied other platforms, other content creators, in this sort of field, the politics and economics field. And there's a lot of really good ones out there. Um, I would urge everyone to use a broad spectrum of information sources. Don't focus on me or some other person or red or blue. Look around. The honest truth is that for the most part, the legacy media platforms do a fairly decent job. They will shade their perspective in some ways. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this, Scott, but I used to watch Meet the Press all the time. Remember that old show?
Yeah.
And it always struck me that, this is a show, if you've never heard of it, it's an NBC show. It was on every Sunday morning. Back in the day before the internet, this was a very important politics show. But it always struck me as interesting that the advertisers on that show were typically large corporations and typically defense corporations like Lockheed Martin and Boeing. And it always kind of made me wonder whether that money, that revenue stream, caused them to sort of change their perspective or shade it or even ignore certain issues. We all remember Eisenhower's warning about the military industrial complex that appears to have become an issue. But I think going down the road, Scott and I will try to point out some good sources of information, and potentially on both sides, right? And try to help everyone out there understand what's really going on, where you can get a good source of information, and then just sort of banter back and forth and talk about issues, what's going on in the country, and what we can all do about it. So right for now, the best immediate impact, I think, would be to follow Scott's social media, follow mine, comment, share them when you can. And when you do that, this will help Scott because it will, and me, because, build our audience, right? And build our platforms and follower base and all that. But it also helps you because as you do that, that will help the algorithm understand what kinds of things you would like to see and start sending it your way. So that should also juice the algorithm to send you some new sources of information that you may not know about already, which I think would be a good thing for everybody.
So Stan, I think this first episode is a perfect case study of what happens when you give two opinionated old soldiers a microphone.
Yeah, for good or ill, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is going to be fun. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. We're going to talk politics and economics, but the other silly things could include football, baseball, grandkids. I don't know what else, Scott. What kind of silly things do you think you'd like to chat about down the road?
Just the paradoxes of human nature, how
No.
we are all self-contradictory in some way or another,
Yeah.
and sometimes pointing out our own idiosyncrasies is insightful as well as entertaining.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's helpful to poke fun at yourself, right? Because that can be sort of engaging. But at the end of the day, the idea here is to keep that finger in the dike, right? And we want to have a lot of fun with this, but this is important. There are important messages from these two old soldiers that we think need to be out there, and we're going to do the best we can to put it out there in an entertaining and engaging, but also informative way.
Right.
So,
With the goal of letting you determine which path you take in the fog to
right.
find the answers that work for you. We want to stimulate your thinking.
That foggy bottom line is not going to get much less foggy, but we'll see if we can get some light on it somehow. So, any final thoughts there, Scott?
No, just thank you again, Stan, for all the support that you've been offering the campaign, and also for the invite to be on your inaugural podcast here.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you. As always, we always have good conversations, and look forward to talking again soon. If you're wondering how often we'll be doing this, the plan right now is to publish new episodes with Scott and I once a week. So we'll be back next week with another joint episode. But we also plan to do some impromptu stuff with either just me or Scott and I. Just real quick, short ones if something pops up that we think it would be helpful to talk about, whether campaign related or not. So look out for that. So these will be on YouTube. We'll put links to them in the other social media. And then hopefully at some point we'll be in the podcast universe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or one of those. So take a look. Let us know what you think. You can send me an email at rstantonscott@foggybottomline.com if you have any thoughts. And just let us know what you think. And if there's any subjects you'd like for us to take a look at, if there's anything you'd like for us to talk about, and if you have any suggestions for production values, the sound, any of that, please let us know, because we're both definitely amateurs at this so far, and we just want to get it right and give you something that's informative and entertaining. So
Two little Dutch boys with a podcast.
Right. All right. Well, take care, Scott. For all of you out there, have a good week. Enjoy, and we'll see you all in about a week or so. All right. Take care.
Wow.
Ciao.